Hello, my name's Andrew, and today we're doing a first impression review of the long requested Xero Denver Leather Edition. Let's check it out. Up front, you've got a really good wide toe box, and it's actually a bit wider than the original version of the Denver, which is great. And also because it's leather, it's very supple and it conforms to the shape of your feet over time, which adds a bit of room to the boot as well. In terms of the shape, it does get a little bit more tapered towards the tip, so I wish that they had gone with kind of like a straight shape here. But overall, there's a ton of room in the boot and it shouldn't be a problem for most people unless you just have like ridiculously extra wide feet. In terms of how the leather feels, it's very soft. I like the look of it. It's kind of a desert boot vibe. And it's like halfway in between sort of like a glossy leather and a suede type leather that would get dirty very easily, which I like. So I think it's got a really good balance of design and functionality. And then they've also kind of rough cut some of the edges on the leather, which I think looks cool, looks a little bit more natural. And then in terms of the feel of the upper of the shoe, this is the one place where I noticed just a little bit of pressure when I first started wearing the boot, where the insulation kind of comes together with the leather. But then after I'd been wearing it for 10 minutes, I didn't notice it at all. And then the next few days, it was just completely gone. So this is a boot that breaks in extremely fast. Like I said, it's just super soft, flexible. There's nowhere, anywhere in this boot that was rubbing on me, which is great. That's kind of the same experience that I had from the canvas version. They're one of my favorite boots of all time. It's got some nice reinforcement in the back here without feeling clunky. And then same thing on the sides, they just bring the sole up a little bit so that you get a little bit of lateral stability if you're going on uneven terrain. And then there's a pull tab in the back, which is nice. In terms of the insulation, it's like a synthetic fleece and it's pretty warm. I've worn the Xero Denver down to 0 degrees. It has the same insulation in there and my feet stayed really warm, especially if you add a pair of Injinji merino wool toe socks or wool felt insole. But the one thing I will say is that it does limit the temperature range up into higher, hotter temperatures. Like if you get into the high 70s, this boot will start to feel sweaty as well as the original Denver canvas. So that's just something to keep in mind. I think it's better for cooler and cold weather, but you can get it all the way down to 0 degrees with no problem as long as you're wearing enough insulation inside the boot in terms of socks and insoles. But looking at the front, there's also a ton of volume to this boot. So if you're someone who has a raised arch or just wider feet in general, it's gonna work really well for you. I do find this lace material to be a bit slippery, but with this version of the shoe, they have a nice lace hold here. So I find that I didn't have any problems with laces coming undone. Sometimes I just had to stop to pull them a little bit tight. But overall, it's fine. They cinch on really easily. These type of circle eyelets here make the boot really easy to get on. And then when you combine it with something like this, it's a really convenient lacing system. But in terms of the sole, it's got a 6mm sole, so it's a really good medium, middle of the road, do everything type of sole. I like this tread a lot from Xero. This is one of my favorite barefoot treads for trails because you've got the chevron lugs, which have that triangle shape. So if you're going up a hill, they're gonna grab here, and then they're in the reverse direction on the back of the boot. So if you're going down, they're gonna hold in the opposite direction. And then they've also got a little more reinforcement on the back of the tread, which is great for going on super rocky terrain where more open tread like this could get beat up if you don't have something extra or more dense in the back. But I love the feel of this tread. Like I said, the Denver canvas has been one of my favorite barefoot shoes for the past year, for hiking and just for like going to the grocery store when it's like wet and muddy and I'm going on a trail or gravel or stuff like that. It's got a ton of flexibility, and one of the things they've done is they've added this extra line here, which does give you a little more grip too going up and down hills, but it just makes the boot very flexible for having a medium thick sole. And there's lines here, and then in the back there's a split there which opens it up just a little bit. But in terms of the gluing on the sole, I never had any problems with the Denver canvas, which we're going to talk about. But the difference between a glued sole and a stitched sole, the glue does make it a little bit more waterproof, especially in the beginning of the shoe or boot's life, because there's no stitching holes for the water to come through. But obviously the drawback of that is that the glue can come undone after some time. Like I said, the canvas version's been fine so far for me, but if you do have a problem, it's really important that you fix it early with some shoe glue. Basically all you do is if you see it coming unattached anywhere, you put a little bit of glue in there and then you clamp it from the inside, just let it dry. for a day or so until it's cured, and then usually that fixes the problem. You don't want to wait until the hole gets really big because then it becomes harder to fix. But yeah, overall I found these to be incredibly comfortable to wear, and they do have more water resistance than the Denver canvas. They're not completely waterproof, like I wouldn't go through stream crossings with them, but for puddles and mud and rain, anything like that, they were just fantastic. And one last thing I loved about the Denver leather is that for some reason it doesn't show water. Like when I got them wet, with some boots like the Vivo Barefoot Magna, and maybe it's just because it's a darker color, but you get this kind of like I don't know, like darker colored toe box thing going on. But for whatever reason, this leather, when you get it wet, it's not very noticeable. So they still really look good in wet conditions. And overall, I love them. Like I said, Xero also makes a canvas version of the Denver. So this is a great vegan option. It's also got a pretty wide, generous toe box. And you know, it does have some nice room up top as well in terms of volume. It's not quite as stretchy as leather, so you can see there's a little more resistance here. But it's got the same toe guard type design and the glued sole as well as reinforcement in the back. Lace hold here, which helps with the laces, which are just a little bit more slippery. And then the same synthetic insulation inside, which I think it feels pretty good. It does get sweaty, like I said, if it's a little bit hotter. So cooler or colder weather is the best use for this boot. And then it's got the same 6mm sole, which is really flexible, very versatile. You can use this for walking on pavement or out on trails or mud. And you know, there's still enough space in here where it can work well on soft ground, as well as being close enough where you get protection where it'll last a long time on rocks and gravel and stuff like that too. Then we've got the Vivo Barefoot Magna FG. This is another good option for a mid-cut, mid-weight type of boot. It's got a wide toe box. It is a little more squared off on the inside, which I like versus Xero. Also got a good amount of room. The leather has a little more structure to it, so it doesn't have quite the amount of flex as the Xero Denver. It feels a little bit more protective for me. The laces hold, I think, a bit better because they're more soft feeling. They're not synthetic. And then one thing I don't like about this boot is the straps. I do feel a little bit of pressure here, but as long as you're wearing like a thicker layer of socks, it's not a problem. But one thing that this has an advantage of over the Xero Denver is that you can slip it in, which is really convenient. I find myself just using this boot more than anything else because I can just go straight in. I don't have to lace it up. It's just faster. And it's a wool blend collar, so it's really breathable. So even though you've got some good water resistance on the lower part of the shoe, it breathes really well through here and around the collar. So I can wear this up into the 80s and you know, my feet will start to get a little steamy, but it's definitely got a higher temperature range than the Xero Denver leather or canvas. And you can still get it down to 0, like I said, if you put a wool felt insole under here with a couple layers of Injinji merino wool toe socks. In terms of the sole, it's got a 5.5mm sole, so a little bit thinner, a little bit more flexible than the Xero Denver, but a similar type of protection where it's close enough that you can use it on gravel and rocks and stuff like that, but also spaced enough that there's a decent amount of grip for wet terrain. And then for our last option, we've got the Saltich Vintero, which is the lightest of the 4. It's still got a wide toe box, a little more squared off on the side, which I like, kind of like Vivo Barefoot. It's a minimal toe protection here, so overall it's a pretty rugged boot, but it still feels, you know, it's got enough protection to get you through most normal hiking type situations or just casual walking. It's got a little bit of minimal protection around the back and then the strip running down there. It's got a more classic type vibe, I think. I like, this is the vintage tobacco color, which looks really cool. Laces hold pretty well. It's also got a gusseted tongue. Well, it's sort of like a half gusset. It's really interesting because the tongue, see if I can pull it out here. It's like super wide, so it sort of like wraps around. So even though it's not connected here, it provides some really good water resistance. And these boots, as far as I've tested them, are completely waterproof. I think I've had them for more than a year now. And they have a waterproof lining inside, which is insulating as well. So again, you can wear these in super cold conditions. They will get a little bit hot, kind of like the Denver leather and canvas, you know, if you get them above 70 degrees or so. But they've got a nice pull tab on the back. And then for the sole, it's very thin. It's 3.7mm. and it's still got some good flexibility to it, but it has a very interesting crosshatch design. So I find it works really well on both firm ground and wet ground, as long as it's not too crazy steep, because it, you know, like I said, it is a thinner sole, so there's only so much it can do on really slippery, muddy conditions. But overall, I like this one too. It's held up pretty well. There's one area here where it just delaminated just a little bit, but it hasn't compromised the water resistance because, like I said, it's got that lining on the inside. So no matter what happens here, even if there's a little bit of separation, it's still almost completely waterproof, unless I just get it drenched day after day after day without enough time in between for it to dry. But yeah, that's my long-awaited first impression review of the Xero Denver Leather and Friends. But if you'd like to support the channel, you can shop with the referral links down below. Browse and filter more products with the shoe finder tool at my website, barefootwear.org, or watch my Xero drop transition video to learn more about barefooting. Finally, if you have a question about the Xero Denver Leather or about barefoot shoes in general, let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. Catch you next time. Peace.